Can you still see the title screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Because for some reason it changed on me. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about SCORE real quick. I do expect a few more to join, but let's go ahead and get started so we can keep on track for everybody today. I want to welcome you all to nonprofit in one of the webinars in this series. What do I need for a grant proposal? And we have Sam Solomon with us today. He is a SCORE Boston mentor. And he knows everything there is to about this subject. So you're in good hands today. All right. So I want to tell you a little bit about SCORE. SCORE offers training, as in this webinar. Please make sure to check out the SCORE website and look for the newsletter for future webinars that we'll be offering. The most important thing that SCORE does is mentoring. Mentoring is free and confidential. Our mentors are volunteers with a lot of knowledge and experience that they want to share with folks that are thinking about starting a business, that are already in the process of starting that business, and that are in a business and trying to grow that business or having questions along the way. I'm often asked, what is a mentoring session like? They usually range in the 30 to 60 minute range, depending on the number of questions at the beginning. It is an ongoing relationship. And often mentors will help you on that first meeting come up with a goals or a plan, so you can keep moving forward. Sometimes they'll bring in other mentors to help with specific tasks. So it's a very fluid process that is really driven by you and everything that you want to learn along the way. So how to get a mentor. You can put a note in the chat today and I'll make sure the correct chapter reaches out to you, or you can go to the websites listed here and I will put those in chat after we get, excuse me, after we get started. You can find not only how to get a mentor, but all some of the recordings for the trainings that we've had, templates and tools, and little short presentations. So those websites are full of a ton of information. So I encourage you to check that out. We're going to go ahead and you just use the chat for questions today. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in chat. We will offer opportunity at the end to ask a question out loud, and we'll be using the raise hand for that. And I will let you know how that'll work when we get to that point. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop my share for now, but then I'm going to be putting up another little outline agenda, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Sam, and you can tell us a little bit about yourself and get started.
Thank you, Teresa. By way of background, I spent about 30 years of my career as a consultant in nonprofits and public agencies. And when I joined SCORE, I was quite surprised to see how many nonprofit or people interested in establishing nonprofits or seeking guidance from one that they currently are involved with. There were, and so there's a steady flow of people and organizations that come to us for guidance. And one of the things that I learned throughout my consulting work was that one of the most important things that agencies or organizations, excuse me, needed to do is to learn how to find money. I get any number of clients who have an idea, nonprofit realm, and one of the last things they give any thought to is, how am I going to finance the operation? And grants are one of several types of funding that is open to nonprofits. And so there is an outline that Teresa, I think she's putting it up. And I'm going to sort of follow this outline and take you through, there you go, and take you through the major segments of writing a grant proposal, and try to flesh out for you some thoughts that I have from my experience. Well, first of all, the words grant and contract get interchanged sometimes. There are two principal ways that nonprofits find funding outside of individual fundraising or fundraising campaigns. One is through grant proposals. Grants almost invariably come from foundations or corporate entities like banks, insurance companies, major companies that use a company foundation to do their good work in the community. And so that is the principal way that organizations seek outside funding. And one of the most important things is to know how to present your organization and the need that you're trying to address. It does not make a lot of sense to send a letter asking for general support. Most foundations are reluctant to give operating funds or general funding. They prefer to be focusing their money on specific program initiatives that organizations are undertaking. So it's really important to spell out in considerable detail, frankly, what it is that you want to do, how much money it's going to take, in other words, your budget. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about that. Another type of funding that certain types of nonprofits seek comes in the form of contract. A contract typically would be funding made available by a government agency. That can be local, state, or federal. These are funds that are made available to carry out certain program functions. When a legislative body creates a program, the idea generally is not for the agents for a government agency to operate the program. It would be quite unwieldy in terms of personnel if that were the case. And so government agencies quite often issue requests for proposals, RFPs, that seek existing agencies, private or nonprofit agencies, or in some cases, for-profit organizations to request funding so that they can carry out the functions of the program. So that, for example, might be early childhood education. There's state money and federal money that goes to early childhood education, and there are early childhood organizations in most communities. They apply for contracts to provide early childhood services. You've often, I'm sure, heard of NIH, National Institutes of Health. They write billions of dollars in contracts during a year, having universities and private research organizations apply for money to carry out certain federal science initiatives. So that's what a contract is. The vast majority of the funding that I'm going to be talking about today is in the form of grants, and it goes overwhelmingly to nonprofits. And for those of you who may not make this distinction, a nonprofit in order to qualify for funding, grant funding from foundations, corporate giving programs, and such, have to be established as nonprofit tax exempt entities, tax exempt under the Internal Revenue Service Code. And it's highly unlikely that if your organization is not tax exempt, that you will be able to get funding. So you should also keep that in mind. An effective grant proposal gives information about the applicant organization. It also explains why the organization needs the grant money and how it will be used. Maybe to carry out a specific program. It might be for special projects within the organization, what I call capacity building. You want to strengthen the organization and you seek money for specific types of strengthening activities. There was a time when most foundations that gave grants, it just took your application without any standard format for presentation. And a long time ago, probably 30, 35 years ago, an organization that at the time was called Associated Grantmakers of Massachusetts developed something that they called the Common Proposal Format, which they made available to organizations seeking grant support from foundations. Not all foundations accepted the Common Proposal form, but eventually the majority did. Associated Grantmakers changed its name just a few years ago to Philanthropy Massachusetts. And what I have seen is that now a significant number, if not a majority of foundations have online application forms. And those online forms must be followed in order to seek funding. But if you develop a standard application form that you want to use in raising money, you can always do cut and paste. The vast majority of online applications request basically the same information as the common proposal format. Some of you may be from outside the Boston area or outside of Massachusetts, but I think this information is probably good anywhere in the country in giving guidance for how to draft a proposal. There was a time when you submitted a proposal in writing that it was expected you would write a cover letter that would introduce the main points of the application in very summary form. With the advent of digital applications, you don't see a request for cover letters anymore, but you will occasionally do that. And it's important to have a short sort of elevator speech that you convert into a cover letter in those cases where there's the ability to do so. Following that, a short paragraph, executive summary, that concisely defines your project's mission and the grant request that you are making. It outlines the basic needs and impact of the project. It provides an overview of what results you expect from the project. And finally, tells the funder how your money is going to, how its money is going to be used in supporting the project for which you're seeking funding. The next section, statement of need, is really, in some respects, the heart of the proposal. You want to make a strong statement that identifies actual issues, needs that you want to address. A general observation that there's, for example, a great deal of hunger in our community, or their children going without early childhood education is insufficient. You need to have data, and you need to spell out what the challenge is that you're trying to address. So any supporting data that you can accumulate, along with the sources from where you obtain the data, is really important to potential success of your proposal. And you also need to make a case for why your organization has the best solution to address the problem. What kind of skills does the organization have, both in terms of personnel and overall operation that will help to ensure the success of the program. And lastly, a good statement of need expresses a degree of urgency. Why you need to deal with this problem now. It's an immediate problem. And, excuse me, proposal ought to include also your goals. You make a statement of need. What are the desired outcomes? And to provide that in a convincing way, it's useful to talk about the strategies that you're going to use to address a specific problem. For example, how are you going to assure that more children are accepted into your early childhood program, and how the funding will help you accomplish your goal. You need to also indicate a time frame and an explanation of how you're going to approach the issue. And it's helpful if you can show how your solution will address each point of the issue that you're trying to solve. The statement of need and the goals and objectives are your best opportunity in an application to make the case for why the issue that you're addressing is so important that it needs support immediately. And secondly, it gives you an opportunity to spell out in some detail how you're going to achieve the desired outcome. Increasingly over the last 15 or 20 years, funders also want to know, how are you going to measure the achievement of your goal? That is, how are you going to, what data are you going to accumulate to demonstrate how your efforts have helped to address the project or the program that you're targeting? You need to spell out when you expect the program to conclude, and make sure that the data addresses each key point of the issue that you intend to solve, address. Basically, in the evaluation is your best chance to make a case for how you're going to ensure the success, the kind of data that you'll be able to provide at the end of the process that will demonstrate to the funder that you're achieving the goals that you set out at the beginning. There are other types of funding that nonprofits use, as I alluded to earlier. They do individual fundraising, they do major campaigns, fundraising campaigns, and they sometimes, for example, if you have, let's say you have a product that you sell to people in the public, or you have real estate that you lease out to tenants. The money that you derive from those sorts of business opportunities can be income to the organization, but you have to pay taxes, even though you're a tax-exempt organization. If you're operating a business within your organization that derives revenue for purely business purposes, you pay income tax on it, but certainly it's still a way of attracting additional funding. Be prepared to provide a range of organizational information in your application. What's your organization's mission? A few sentences about its history and its track record over the years. Provide a list of your board of directors. Foundations always look to see who serves on the board, how large the board is, which is of importance to some. Some data on the population that your organization serves. Just basic demographic data so that they understand what you're in business to do and who you're serving. You should have a copy of your IRS tax exempt letter. At the end of each year, I'm sure most of you know, you need to file a nonprofit equivalent of the 1040 tax return form. It's called the Form 990. It's basically a tax return that spells out how the agency is managing the finances during the year. Need a copy of your annual budget. Very important that a funder sees that you are in a financial position where you will continue to be viable. And the budget tends to validate that. Also, you need a project budget. What are the specific project costs? How much of that money are you requesting from the funder? And specifically how the funds are going to be spent, staff, for overhead, and for, as I said, or as I alluded to earlier, earned income or income derived from selling a product or leasing a property. I tacked on to the bottom of this outline some major sources of grant information. Two that I have used for years. First is Philanthropy in Massachusetts, which does a lot more than issue the common proposal form. Philanthropy Massachusetts is the largest philanthropic giving library in Massachusetts, in New England. They have huge resources. You can, there is, he says highlighting the internet URL. Very useful, particularly if you're looking for funding in Massachusetts. If you are a member of Philanthropy Massachusetts, you have full access to the library, and you can access its online funder directly. A much more substantial, listing of funders is the foundation directory online. This is a national grant directory. It is voluminous. It ostensibly covers every foundation in the country, or funder. It doesn't have to be just a foundation. It is very user-friendly. It's quite expensive to subscribe to, over $1,000, but there are many public libraries that carry it. I've actually used it in libraries, so I think you should find it pretty easy to access it. I often get questions about how do you go about finding funders, and I think the foundation directory particularly, but also the Philanthropy Massachusetts funder list, very helpful in pointing you in the direction of funders. There are many other ways finding funders, which we could talk about it later if you wish. I would lastly want to just talk about the process of getting foundation applications out, funder applications out. Grant writing is a time-consuming process. And you need somebody who's skilled at writing in order to make a compelling case. And to the extent that you can afford it, it's a good idea to either have someone on the staff function primarily as a grant writer, but there are also part-time people, people who are consultants that do grant writing. And I think that the common proposal form makes it, over a long term, much easier. It streamlines the process. Once you've created a solid template, or templates if you have more than one program for which you're seeking funding, then you can simply do a cut and paste job. And that reduces the workload for whoever is writing proposals. That's just a general overview. I've been on the receiving end of proposals as a reviewer, and I've written many proposals. And I find that funders are particularly impressed by well-written proposals that lay out basically this type of approach that I've outlined. Sending a vague or insufficient request is not likely to get you very far. And so I think it's really important to focus on the quality of what you're putting together. I would be happy to respond to specific questions if I can.
Okay, yeah, we do have one question in chat. Before I go to that, Please put your questions into chat. If you would like to ask your question out loud, I'm happy to allow you to speak. Just use the raise hand icon on your Zoom bar, and I will promote you to be able to unmute yourself and ask your question. The first question I have was about I believe it's about the two links you provided. The first one is specifically for Massachusetts, and the second one is national. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's overlap because the Massachusetts directory is incorporated just by chance into the foundation directory. But Philanthropy Massachusetts has much more local, when I say local, Massachusetts information than you would find probably in the foundation directory.
Okay. And then I also have a question about information on applying for nonprofit status. I don't think we really had intended on getting into that today.
I can, address it briefly.
Briefly,
Right.
yes, go ahead.
If you're setting up or a nonprofit, or what you intend to be a nonprofit, you need to do two things initially. One is you need to register your organization with your state, with the state in Massachusetts. It's the Attorney General's office. And you also then need to submit an application to the IRS to obtain tax exempt status. Registration with the state, in most cases, I can't speak for states outside of Massachusetts, but my guess is that it's still a simple process, and you can get registration completed in a relatively short time, probably a week or two at most. It will sometimes take 4 to 6 months to get tax exempt certification. And I won't get into it in any detail now, but if you want to start raising money and you don't yet have your 501c3, that's the section of the IRS code specifically relating to nonprofit fundraising, then there are ways of working with other organizations that already have a 501c3 to have them help you raise money through serving basically as a name and a tax exempt certifier until you get your own. It's much more detailed than that, but that's basically it.
Okay. And I have somebody that would like to ask a question out loud, so I'm going to allow Kadrian. I hope I say your name correctly. Please go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I was the one that asked the question about the nonprofit status. So that information that was provided, appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, let me say, Kadrian, and to everyone else, there's a wealth of information, as most of you I'm sure know, on the internet. So you can go to the internet to get guidelines for registering your organization in your state. You can get the forms and guidelines for seeking the nonprofit status. You get there are links to creating a business plan, which supports or makes the case for your organization, the organization that you're creating. There's an enormous amount of very good information available. So when you have a question, think about it in terms of keywords and look it up on the internet. I find that very helpful in my own work.
Okay, is that a session that does SCORE provide a webinar on that topic? Do you know?
Or specifically on creating a nonprofit?
Yes.
Yeah, we do that. Actually, I've done some counseling in that area.
Okay. All right.
If you're interested, file a request for to become a client. You may well end up seeing me again.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a good.
You too.
So, yeah, and just to clarify that too, we do have another nonprofit webinar coming on October 12th. I did
That's
put
right.
that link into the chat. It'll be an overview of nonprofits. And as Sam mentioned, you can meet any of our nonprofit mentors and they can go over in detail what relates directly to you.
Right.
Okay, I have another question. If you do not have the 501c3, then you may be able to get fiscally sponsored. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yep. Under another company. Yep. We did
That's
talk
right.
about that. Yep. Sorry.
But I can just allude back. When I talked about having another agency serve as a proxy for you, it's called a fiscal sponsor. So in that case, you list the fiscal sponsor as the recipient for the funding that you're requesting, which is then transferred by the sponsor to you. And it's a somewhat elaborate process, and you need to make sure that you have a legally sound agreement between the two agencies. But it is a way to begin fundraising before you have tax exempt status.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Anyone that want to ask a question out loud? We're happy to answer those questions today.
Well, let me say that I'm happy to, after this session, in the days ahead, I'm happy to have you contact me for any specific questions you may have. And as what Teresa and I have pointed out, if you're looking for some significant guidance in any particular area, seek to become a client, and you'll be assigned to a mentor who can hopefully get you on your way.
I do have another comment in chat. I don't know if you can address. Do you know why it's difficult to get a grant as a faith-based nonprofit? Have you had that experience?
Basically, it comes down to separation of church and state. That there have been cracks in that what had previously been a more rigid separation. I believe the rationale is that faith-based organizations are religious in nature and should not be eligible for public funding. But that's starting to break down. It's not just starting, it has been with the establishment of more and more faith-based schools, for example. So that has a lot to do with it. The fact that you're a faith-based organization does not mean that you can't qualify for nonprofit fund, for foundation funding. If you operate a community program, for example, if you have keep going back to early childhood education, if you operate a daycare program that's open to the community, you theoretically can qualify to receive foundation money, and in some cases even government money, because the type of community service that you're providing by offering a much needed community program like early childhood education. So there are no rigid lines.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that wraps everything up for today. I should have the recording posted by Monday on our website, and I put that link in there. And again, if you have any questions, remember Score Mentor is free and confidential, so they're happy to work with you at any stage in your nonprofit journey. Definitely reach out to us, and I can connect you with either the Boston chapter or the chapter that you are nearest. You can reach me at outreach@scoreboston.org. And you all have a great weekend. Thank you, Sam, for all the information.
Sure, it's a pleasure.